Woven Threads, an oral history project focused on capturing personal narratives and experiences of migration and intersectionalities within women's experiences. Today is the 16th of February 2024, and I'm here with Miss Melissa Burnell. Today we will be discussing various aspects of your life and experiences. The purpose of this interview is to preserve your unique perspectives and contribute to a broader understanding of how identity and various experiences intersect to create different experiences. Your insights will help future generations appreciate the richness and diversity of the various experiences of women around the world. Before we proceed, I want to assure you that your participation is entirely voluntary. At any point, if you wish to pause, skip a question, or withdraw your consent, please let us know. Your privacy and confidentiality are important to us, and we will take reasonable measures to protect your personal information. However, please note that the interview will be recorded and may be shared with the public or used in educational materials. Are you comfortable proceeding with the interview under these conditions?
Yes.
Great, thank you for your cooperation. Could you please tell us when and where you were born?
I was born April 6th, 1983 in Concord, no, I take that back, Plymouth, New Hampshire in the United States.
Thank you. Could you please share your journey of migrating to South Korea or any other countries that you've resided in?
Okay, so in 2010, that was our first international migration, and we moved to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And just to kind of give you an overall idea of our migrations, we were there for 4 years, and then we moved to Beijing in China for 2 years, and then in the southern part of China, Guangzhou for a year, and then to Korea, and we've been here, this is our 7th year in Korea. Do you want me to focus a little bit more about one or more of those migrations?
I think it depends on your preferences.
I think probably the first one is the more interesting one, because it was, as somebody that had barely even stepped foot into Canada, just right above New Hampshire, you know, this was a huge leap to come internationally, to move to the United Arab Emirates. And it came about because I had a colleague that he was an art teacher, and I had found out that he and his wife had lived in Thailand and taught in Thailand for years. And I'm like, wow, that's so amazing how lucky that he had this 1 in a million chance to do this, you know, this thing. And then I found out from my boss at the time of, oh yeah, there's organizations that help teachers go internationally and teach overseas. And it was definitely a seed that was planted in me, and I, even though I was not an international traveler, I was like, oh yeah, I want to completely uproot my life and move overseas. This is a thing that I have to do. So it, you know, I had talked to my husband about wanting to do it, and initially he did not want to do it, but I was convincing that this is something that I really had to do. It took a couple of tries, because the first job fair that I went to, I was recently pregnant with my first child, and it, you know, they were going to be born at a difficult time of year to be moving overseas. So the second year that I went to a job fair, I got an offer in Dubai for an all-girls school, and that was it. I took the job. And leading up to it, it was very shocking to have to navigate the process of moving overseas, all of this paperwork and logistics they have to figure out. And we had a house at the time, and we had to pack up our entire house and put it in a storage unit. I thought at the time we were only going to be gone for 2 years, so that I was just going to leave this house temporarily, and then we would be back, which was not the case. And it was, not everybody was supportive of the move. Most people were, but my mom in particular was really unhappy about, I think, where we're going. And, you know, she is also somebody that lived her whole life in the United States, and she, I think, had a limited understanding of other parts of the world, so she thought I was going to be in danger, that we were all going to be in danger. And she had printed all these articles that she found online that were all of these sensational, you know, kind of negative things about Dubai, and she mailed it to me to try to convince me not to go. But I'd already signed a contract, and I am a woman of my word, and I was like, no, it'll be fine. So we moved to Dubai the day after my first child turned 1. So packed up this little baby and a number of suitcases and hopped on the plane and went to Dubai. And it was instantly like, wow, this is so different from what we're used to. I don't know how much you want me to go into that, or if that will come up in another question, if you want me to kind of talk about those initial experiences. Do you want me to answer that now?
Just a second, I need to check that it's filming.
Sorry.
Because I didn't. Okay, it is. Okay.
Okay.
So actually, the second question is, how did you adapt to the new culture or lifestyle in the places that you migrated to? And were there any specific challenges or adjustments that you had to make?
Okay. So Dubai, again, being our first experience, I think it was a big adjustment, but it was exciting. So one of the first things was just kind of figuring out, okay, so we're brand new in this country. I mean, we arrived at night and it was like, okay, we're hungry. Now what? Like, literally, where do we go to get food? We're in this apartment building that we're unfamiliar with, and we're looking out the window and there's sand. And we're like, okay, I think down the road, I think there's lights. I think that's maybe a store. So one of us is gonna walk and go see if there's food there. The first time we were at the grocery store, it'd just be like, okay, there's literally nothing at home for food. So what do we need? What are the basic things we need here at a store that we don't recognize the brands, and we don't recognize some of the foods, like things we had never seen in our life. And of course there were things that we were familiar with, but one of the things that the school did that I had gotten the job at, they held a cultural session for us as new teachers, and I'm really grateful they did that, because Dubai is much more conservative than what I was used to in the United States. So they wanted to, teach us some of the do's and the don'ts, so that we could make sure that we were being respectful in our new home, and also making sure that we were staying out of trouble. For instance, that in New Hampshire, I could wear shorts and a tank top, and that was fine. But in Dubai, I had to make sure my shoulders were covered. I had to wear something below my knees. If, my husband and I were in public, holding hands probably would have been fine, but we would choose not even to hold hands. Certainly no other displays of affection. We had to just make sure that we were really mindful of this new culture that we were in. And even if it wasn't something that we necessarily agreed with, it didn't matter. You have to be respectful. And so, yeah, we were. Language wasn't so much of an issue, because all the signs there had English and Arabic, so it was easy to navigate, and everybody that we encountered spoke English, so that was quite an advantage for us. You can come in. She's recording, so we can just pop over there or something. When we moved to China, I would say, so we knew a little bit about what it means to be in a new culture, but there were some new challenges. So certainly most people were not speaking English and the signs weren't in English. So there was a lot more of like, okay, how are we going to do any kind of communication whatsoever? When we first arrived in China, in Beijing, we had a teacher that was a volunteer to help the new people out a little bit initially. Like, here's how you ride the bus. Here's how much it costs to get on the bus. We're gonna ride the bus to the closest grocery store. So we knew how to get from point A to B. And it was a must that we had to learn some basic words and phrases so that you could ask for two of something, or you could say the name of the school to the taxi driver so you could get back home, things like that. So that was definitely a change from Dubai. Things that when you move to a new place that's different is like, even how do I do banking? How do I pay for electricity? I mean, in China, we ran out of electricity a couple times because we weren't used to having to preload your electricity money. In Dubai, it was like, your bill comes every month. So getting used to these new systems is something that we always have to do. And same thing when we came to Korea. In Korea, I feel like it was back to being an easier transition. There was so much help from Chadwick and the community that we live, where it was so many teachers there. It was incredibly easy to get help. And language, it was kind of a mixture of like, you might be able to go to a place and communicate in English, maybe not. But by now we're kind of seasoned, so we could just kind of navigate our way around. Not to mention, as the years went on, getting smarter and smarter phones has made life incredibly easy. I feel very lucky and privileged to have technology to help us in these transitions. Yeah, that was a lot of information.
Thank you for sharing all that. Considering all the different countries you've lived in throughout the years, have you experienced any like significant or historic events in any of those countries, such as like protests or performances or marches?
Let's see here. In Dubai, I remember there was, and I might not remember the exact wording of it, like they had won some kind of contract. I don't know if it was like to host a world fair or something like that, that the country was really excited about. And I remember one day being in our apartment and suddenly these jet planes, whatever, come like whooshing over our apartment, and they're like streaming the colors of the flag, and we're like, whoa. And it was just in celebration. So that was that was interesting. I believe we were in Beijing, and I hope that I'm accurate on this. I believe we were in Beijing at the time that the one-child policy was like taken away, so that it was suddenly families can now have 2 children without consequences. So that was a big historical thing. Not that there were celebrations in the streets or anything like that. Goodness. I think the thing that will always stand out the most in Korea, but makes me incredibly sad, is the Itaewon tragedy. That will always stick with me.
Thank you for sharing all that. Could you describe your childhood back in New Hampshire? What were some of your earliest memories?
Oh my gosh. I'm somebody that has always had to move a lot, but not for, you know, maybe the same reasons as other people. So there's some of my earliest memories are like bouncing from the first house I lived in, then we were in an apartment building, then we were living with my grandparents, then we were living in another house before we moved to Texas, and that's where I like lived for 10 years, like some significant growing up years. But I spent a lot of time outside. Of course, wasn't glued to a screen back then. And for the majority of my childhood, I didn't have a sibling around, so I got like really fine-tuned my imagination and always found a way to entertain myself, you know, being outside and being creative and whatnot. Specific memories? I remember the second place I ever lived, again, it was, you know, an apartment building. I was in kindergarten, and I had a boy that lived across the street, or not across the street, across the hall from me. We were in the same kindergarten class, and we spent all our time together, and we had gone outside, and in this little clump of trees were some old boards of wood piled up, and I remember pretending we were pirates, and we would climb all over it. We often played things like, it just seems so silly now, it'd be like, you know, again, using our imagination, would be like, okay, we're gonna be unicorns today, like, what do you look like as a unicorn? Okay, well, this is what I look like as a unicorn, and then we would prance all around the, you know, all around the area. And I always feel like, it always seemed like there were no adults ever watching us. We were just always outside doing whatever we wanted. We weren't wandering into the streets or anything like that, so we were seemingly safe. Yeah, it just felt like we had so much freedom to have imaginative adventures.
That sounds really fun.
It was fun. It was fun, and it makes me a little bit sad, you know, for my own children that they don't have those same experiences, you know, but yet they have other experiences that I never would have dreamt about as a kid. So I guess it's a trade-off. Yeah.
Could you describe what your family was like?
So if we're talking structure-wise, complicated. One of the reasons that, you know, I moved a lot initially is because my mom and dad divorced. So so I have my mom, I have my dad, I have a half brother that lived with me only a short bit of time in my life, and somewhere in my kindergarten year, he went to go live with his father in another state. So that was the last time we lived together. It was when I was like 6 years old. Then my mom remarried my stepfather, and he has a couple of sons that one I've to this day have never met. And the other one I just barely met the summer before the pandemic, and it just happened to be that I was in California, he lives in Oregon, he was a couple hour drive away, we were connected on Facebook, and he's like, I know where you're at, do you want to meet? Of course I want to meet. And my father eventually remarried as well, so I have a stepmother, and then I have a couple stepsisters. Yeah, and it's a wide range of, you know, relationships. Like I said, my stepbrothers, you know, where one I never met, the other one I've only met once. My stepsisters and I are close, and I'm really, really grateful for that. My half-brother, even after all these years, we don't know each other incredibly well. So, yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. So I guess with my own family, being married and my own 2 children, I kind of wanted to develop and nurture close relationships that I always wished I had growing up. And the, ooh, it makes me a little sad. Can you give me a moment?
Yeah.
Didn't expect to be sad about it. I guess the one thing.
It's okay, take your time.
Tell me this will be taken out of the video.
Yeah,
I think the saddest part though is, so like, I think we've done a good job as a close family unit developing close relationships between the 4 of us that are here together. But as a consequence of being overseas, my kids barely know the rest of their family. And unfortunately, when I'll be like, oh, Aunt so-and-so, Uncle so-and-so, this grandparent, that grandparent, sometimes the kids are like, who? And I feel terrible about that. But again, I guess it's like give and take. There's like blessings, and then there's things that are like, well, oops. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I know you somewhat described this already, but could you describe the house you grew up in, or the houses?
The very first place I remember living in New Hampshire, is what we call an A-frame. And so like there was a part of the house that literally is shaped like a triangle. That's where the A comes from. And then I think it had some kind of piece coming off of it. But I only lived there until I was, I think, 3. Then we moved, kind of down the road, maybe a couple miles. I don't know what that is in kilometers, but then we lived in this apartment building, which I think at the time were newly renovated. And at the time they felt lovely and wonderful. But as a quick side story, when my husband and I were, before we were, we were still quite young, we were looking for an apartment to live in, and we looked there happened to be an apartment available, and they were not as nice as I remembered them being. It looked like a fire hazard, actually. So from there I moved further north in New Hampshire and lived with my grandparents and my mom for a little bit of time, like a year, I think. And they had this really big house that I think maybe used to be like a bed and breakfast or something, because like the bedroom, there's so many bedrooms and they had numbers on them. And they had like a little country store that they ran, like a gift shop, with a huge yard. Just, I think there was like 3 acres where I could just run and frolic and use my imagination, and it was wonderful. And then when my mom met my stepdad, we moved a town over, and we lived in a house there for maybe like a year and a half. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I feel like it was maybe partly not even fully finished. Like I kind of have some memories of maybe some slight under construction, but never actually was being worked on kind of elements of the house. I guess what was good about that one is I could walk down the street to school, and there was a park directly behind the house over a fence. And there was like the local pool in the rec center that I could go to all the time, which, by the way, at that point in my life, so I was like 7, and all summer long I was like left to my own every day because my mom and stepdad went to work, and so it was all that, again, like
Yeah.
adults weren't really watching. I had to get up and get breakfast and take myself to swim lessons and take myself to the rec center and figure out lunch and entertain myself for 8 or 9 hours until I got home. I don't know how I stayed alive, but then from after that house, we moved to Texas, and I lived with my aunt and uncle for a few months, and then we moved into a trailer park, and we lived in that trailer park in a couple different trailers for years until I left high school. I graduated a semester early and then moved back up to New Hampshire, lived in my father's house, which was also a great big beautiful home that had been in the family for a long time. So such a wide range of places to live. Yeah. Did you want to know anything specific more about those?
No, I think what you told me earlier about like the outdoor spaces was really nice.
Yeah. The first one, the A-frame, and being really little, I only have some vague memories. I remember being in a garden and eating dirt. I remember eating dirt out there. Again, nobody was watching. I remember we had like a little tiny brook running through the yard, like just teeny little bit of water. Yeah, but I think my grandparents' house and having all of that yard, land, whatever, that was probably some of my fondest memories. And to this day, when I smell cut grass, I'm mentally right back to their house, where my grandfather's just mowed all of this lawn, and so it's like all of, just being surrounded by that beautiful summer smell.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Did you have like a religion while growing up?
Yes. I remember when I guess I was still at my grandparents' house. I remember my mom taking me to a church in town, having a conversation with the pastor there, about having me baptized. I don't recall it ever being a conversation with me. I think she felt that it was like one of those things like you just have to do. And so it got done. I don't think we attended church until we moved to Texas, and then it became this kind of thing of if my mom and stepdad had friends that went to a church, we would go to their church. And again, there weren't conversations at home, so it wasn't like I had an understanding really of what my family believed. And then as I got into like my teen years, I had a lot of friends that grew up in, significantly Christian homes. And so quite often if I spent the night on a weekend, we'd go to church on Sunday together, and that's where I kind of started to get a little bit more of a sense of, at least what Christianity was about, and at least the role it played in other people's lives. But I don't think it wasn't really something that was super fostered in my household. I remember my stepfather would make us pray at like Thanksgiving, when we all sat down at the table to have a meal together. But that was really it. Growing up,
So this question is a bit different, but did you have any dreams or aspirations for the future while growing up?
Yeah, what was significant, what was a significant dream and aspiration was when I started middle school, I was allowed to be in band. So in our neighborhood, kids typically didn't start instruments younger than that. There just wasn't, those opportunities didn't really exist. So when you were going into grade 6, you got to try some different instruments one night, and then you were assigned an instrument, and that's it. So because I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do extra stuff before that age, I like latched onto being I played flute, so being a flautist. And I was pretty good at it. And so I had this dream of being like this. I had a private flute teacher that I worked with for a while, and I wanted to be like her. And she, she had her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in music, and she would do things like playing with orchestras, but then she would also do other things, like maybe she was recording commercials, and then she was also working with students. And I didn't know much about business, but that's what I wanted to be. So for a long time I thought, I'm going to be a professional musician. But then it was, when I got to high school and I had to work, and I was studying really hard, and that left me with no time, and I started to get behind with this rigorous band that I was a part of in the high school, and I made the really difficult decision for my senior year, which was only going to be a half year, that I was no longer going to do it, which was like a complete identity changer for me. Didn't become a musician, but that's okay.
How have your aspirations evolved over time after maybe you stopped playing the flute?
Yeah, I guess there was a little bit of time, of course, when I was like, oh wow, so I've been thinking I was going to do this for like 6 years, which is a lot when you're young. Had no clue what else I might be interested in. And to this day, I think this is the wildest and flimsiest way to decide your career, but I think it was meant to be. So anyway, my stepmother was a second grade teacher. And one summer, I think it was before my junior year of high school, one summer I went up to New Hampshire for vacation. They were still in school, and she said, oh, we're having a field trip to the local beach. Would you like to volunteer to come and be a chaperone? And I said, sure. Went to the beach with these kids, had a lovely time, and then it was, going into toward my senior year. Maybe it was the summer before my senior year, so like a year later. Just one day went, I really enjoyed that day at the beach chaperoning those second graders. I should be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher. Now, by all accounts, like I would say, that's, probably not going to work out for somebody, right? Because how could you possibly base your entire career on one day chaperoning at the beach? Because that's not what teaching is about. But I think somehow the stars aligned, and that experience led me to what is my calling. Because I love what I do, and I absolutely feel that I am supposed to be in education. It's just crazy that that's how it started.
It's a very fun story.
Yeah, it's almost like how?
So moving back into your childhood, how were gender roles perceived or experienced in your childhood, and do you think they had an impact on your education or career choices?
I don't recall a lot of explicit messages per se, but I remember seeing chores as being gendered. When I lived at my grandparents' house, it was my grandfather that mowed the lawn and did the outside stuff, while my grandmother did the inside stuff. But they did share things like, dishes. And then, spending the majority of my growing up with my mom and my stepfather, I saw the same thing happening. So my stepfather would do the outside chores, and my mother would mostly do the inside chores. So that was stuck in my head, like that's the way it's meant to be. I don't recall ever being told, you know, you have to do this path because you're a girl, or you can't do this path. But also, my parents hadn't gone to college. So I wonder if that's a part of it. Like maybe they just didn't even, I mean, I really don't know. I don't know if they even just thought that far ahead. And I can't really ask him, so I spoke to my father for many years. My mother passed away almost 12 years ago, so I can't have those conversations now to like dig into what they were thinking. So I think quite early on, I was like, I want to do this thing and nobody's going to stop me. This is the thing I'm going to do. And my mother was just kind of like, okay, all right, you do the thing. So I think in that way, I don't know, I always put my mind on my own path.
I think that's a great mindset to have.
And it's definitely something that I try to carry on with my own children, that you know, you do what you want to do, you do what feels right for you. And even if I hear a hint of something having to do with genders, it's like, oh no, anybody can do whatever they want. Like I just try to squash that real quick. And even in our household, the typical gender roles are not practiced in our household, and I think that, or I hope that's helpful for our children, because you know, I work, my husband's a stay-at-home dad, so it's very kind of opposite than what we, you know, grew up with.
Thank you. What did the food look like in your household?
Oh gosh, I feel like very American, you know. So we were not well off, you know. So what like cheap things? I just remember like a lot of things made with boxes and cans. My mom would do the cooking, and there was like sort of like dishes that she would often rotate. So we might have something out of a box, would be like hamburger helper, where I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like it's got noodles in a box and some flavoring, and then you just need to cook up the ground beef, and then you mix it together, and it's tasty but not incredibly healthy. I think we ate a lot of chicken, some casserole kind of dishes, like she had, we do like a shepherd's pie where it's like ground beef and onions, like as a base layer, and then I think maybe there was like peas and then mashed potatoes on top, and you bake it. And then another one that I've never been able to find the recipe for is like a country pie, and again, beef at the bottom. Apparently we ate beef quite a bit, it's probably cheap. And then it was like this rice, tomato sauce, probably some onions and stuff kind of mixture, and then she chopped it with cheddar cheese. That sounds really weird. And then you bake it. She would often get recipes like the Campbell's cans of soup, like the cream soups would often have recipes, and she would take things like that and make something with the canned soup. I don't know, it just feels like very 80s, 90s child American diet. Oh gosh, what else do we have? I think a lot of things that were just probably, feel bad for saying like easier to cook, but you know, my mom would work and then come home and nobody was there to help her, so then whatever she could whip together quickly. Yeah, I think that's all that's coming to mind right now.
Thank you. This is the last question we have for today. It's, how have you preserved and maintained your heritage and culture while living abroad? Are there any specific practices or traditions or even beliefs you've continued to embrace?
So as I had mentioned to you before, for me, the reality of being a white American and my particular upbringing, there wasn't a lot of rich culture to hang on to. Because even, my ancestry, I don't really know a lot about. I think there's some English in there. I think there's some Irish in there. My mom used to be like, "Oh, you're just a mutt." Like, which is not a nice thing to say, but like she was saying it about herself too. She's, I'd be like, "Oh, Mom, like, but what are we? But what are we?" She's like, "We're just mutts. We're just mutts." So they didn't give me anything to hold on to and to like learn about. So with that being said, this kind of whitewashed, like whatever Hallmark special, like we do Christmas and we would do Easter, but it wasn't really super connected to any religious aspect. And of course, those are things that I still want to do with my kids now, but I don't feel like I have to do things exactly how they were done when I was little. One, can't necessarily find the same thing. Like, let's say I want to do, when my kids were younger, an Easter egg hunt. You know how hard it is to find Easter eggs when you live internationally? Really, really hard. So we always had to improvise. I always had to think about, okay, all right, well, what do I have available and how can I do something fun for the kids that they'll enjoy? And it doesn't matter if it looks like what we did. I think my focus has been more on maybe kind of coming up with our own traditions, which I don't feel like we have a lot of traditions, but just making sure that we focus on creating special memories for each other or with each other, and it doesn't matter if it looks the same each year. Like for Christmas, something that would have been irrelevant when I was a kid, we're very lucky that when it comes to winter break, I'm off of work, my husband is a stay-at-home dad, and the kids are home, so we're all together. So something that we do now is we all think of things that we want to do together, and then we put them on Post-its and we kind of put it on the calendar, and then we have all these things that we get to do throughout the winter break together. So that's become a tradition for us. But other things that were a big deal when I was growing up, like Thanksgiving. I mean, that's such an American holiday, has looked so very different over the years, because either, maybe we at times we didn't even have an actual stove to cook a turkey, or maybe it was so tiny there's no way you could cook a turkey, or maybe you can't find a turkey, or again, it's just all about improvising and like, okay, so maybe we can't make a Thanksgiving meal like I remember it, but can we have a nice meal together? And can we light some candles and just say what we're thankful for? Sure, we can do that. So I would say maybe it's sad, but at the same time, because I didn't grow up with this rich cultural background, it's not like I miss it. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you would like to add about your story, or maybe even your children's stories, considering that they've lived in different cultures for most of their childhood?
Yeah, so my oldest, again, we left the United States when they turned 1. And then my youngest was born in Dubai. So neither of them have really lived in our home country. So they are third culture kids. And I think that's amazing and a blessing in so many ways. Difficult in other ways. But what I'm finding interesting, but maybe a little tricky is as kids get older, they don't have the basic knowledge about their home country that they would have had if we were living there. Not that they need to know everything, but you know, for example, like one of my kids will say the name of a city, but they'll call it a state. You know, like they'll say, you know, I feel like an example the other day was like, you know, like the state of Las Vegas or something. Maybe it wasn't Las Vegas, but my husband and I chuckled because we're like, that's not a state. Oh my. So wondering how that's going to impact them as they get older. When they're older, will it look bad? Will it be bad that they don't have a basic understanding of this country that they really haven't lived in? I even picture, like, my oldest talks about wanting to go to university in the United States, like really, really bad. And then it will almost be like they're this alien there because they don't know the most basic of things about the country. So I don't know, I just imagine it's going to come out all the time in conversations with meeting new people at university or whatever, and I'm like, how do you not know this? How do you not know that? How do you not know more about US history? I just wonder how this is all going to play out. At the same time, they have a wealth of knowledge about other places that I didn't have at that age. And even when I remember having, you know, world history classes or whatever, and I'm reading facts and I'm looking at maps, but I wasn't connected to it, so I didn't even necessarily remember any of it. But living it now, it sticks. Like now, I remember where, you know, many countries are because I have such a personal frame of reference. So maybe in that way, my kids will be okay. So I don't know if it's something that with third culture kids, if it needs to be more of a responsibility and a requirement for parents to make sure their children know more about the countries that are a part of their background. Just a random thought.
Thank you for that. Do you have anything else you would like to share?
I think making the decision to move internationally is the best thing we've ever done. And I mean beyond like marrying my husband and having my children. Like those are my top, like, yeah, those were great choices. But it was scary at first, and we had, you know, it hasn't always been easy. But boy, the life it has allowed us to live, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have reached the end of our interview today. I want to express my gratitude for your time and openness in sharing all of your experiences. Your contribution to our oral history project is invaluable. Your stories will be preserved for future generations, contributing to a better understanding of migration and diversity. I greatly appreciate your insights and the opportunity to document your unique experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.